Welcome to Inside Israel, everyone. I'm Joel Chasnoff, coming to you from Ra'anana, right outside of Tel Aviv. It is April 27th, 2025, and this is episode 80, entitled simply Yom Hazikaron 5785. We're recording this, as you know, on Sunday, and Yom Hazikaron, Memorial Day here in Israel, is on Wednesday, April 30th. And Yom HaZikaron is Israel's day of remembrance, where we remember all the soldiers who have fallen over the years in battle, in training, also in car accidents on the way to and on the way back from training. Any soldier who in any way was involved in their military service and was killed, they are remembered on Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. And in recent years, we've also begun remembering victims of terror as well. That's a more recent addition to this day of remembrance, but that is how the day is commemorated right now. And to me, Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, really is the epitome of what Israel is and what makes Israelis who they are. I feel that if you truly want to know Israelis, if you truly want to know Israelis and who they are and how they think and what makes them so unique amongst all the people in the world, you need to observe them on Yom HaZikaron. And I say that about Israelis in the diaspora as well. You know, it's always very interesting to me. I'm usually in the United States on Yom HaZikaron. And Israelis typically or often in America will not go to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but on Yom HaZikaron, Erev Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, they show up at their synagogues, their JCCs, their federations, their Hillels for the Yom HaZikaron ceremony. It's just in their DNA, it's in their blood, and it really is, I think, the ultimate expression of Israeliness. So if you want to know what Israelis are really like and what Israel is really like, then you need to be here in Israel on Yom HaZikaron and experience it at least once. And I was thinking about how I wish the world could see Israel on Yom HaZikaron. You know, it's such a contrast. You can know a lot about how certain peoples feel about life by their attitudes toward death. And the sad truth is, if you look at our enemies and how they lionize death and worship death and crave it, and compare it with how Jews in general and Israelis in particular have such reverence for those who have fallen, it's really the opposite. It's the two extremes on polar ends of the spectrum. And I feel that if the world could compare and contrast, they would know everything they need to know about this narrative and everything they need to know about the story. Just watch how the two warring peoples just look at their attitudes toward death, and you'll know everything you need to know. It's a very, very somber day here in Israel. And what I want to do right now is give you a little bit of insight into what Yom HaZikaron is actually like here in Israel, and also what it will be like this year, because this year is different from even, Yom HaZikaron is very different from every other day, but this year's Yom HaZikaron, very much like last year's, will be even different from the typical Yom HaZikaron. So I want to go into that as well. So first of all, let's talk about the mood here in Israel on Yom HaZikaron. I mean, huge contrast from Memorial Day in America. You ask someone, what's Memorial Day in America? They will start saying mattress sales and used car deals, and the local swimming pool opens for the summer, barbecues, parades, hanging out with the family, maybe go to a ball game. I mean, that is Americans' Memorial Day. And I bet if you ask a lot of American kids what Memorial Day is, they won't even know that it is really on the calendar to remember soldiers who have been killed. They associate it only with that really cool and fun stuff. Well, in Israel, it couldn't be more different. It is the saddest day on the calendar by far. You know, Yom Kippur, It's not really a sad day in Israel, and it's actually not a sad day on the Jewish calendar. In traditionally in Judaism, Yom Kippur is a day of we ask forgiveness, but it's also a day of renewal, and when we really feel hope as we move into the new year that the slate has been wiped clean. And in Israel, Yom Kippur is a day where everyone wears white, and often the streets are filled with people hanging out with friends, and kids are bike riding. So it's not a somber day necessarily. Now Yom Hazikaron, Memorial Day, it really is. It's gut wrenching. There's no other way to say it. The mood is very, very sad. It's very somber, uh, and you can feel it in the air. It permeates the atmosphere everywhere you go. And you can't be in Israel and not know that it is Yom HaZikaron. Whereas in the United States, you could be anywhere and not necessarily know that it's Memorial Day. But in Israel, you can't help but feel it. So the mood is very, very somber, very, very sad. And that goes for kids as well as adults. What kinds of events are happening? What kinds of commemorations are taking place here in Israel on Yom Kippur? Well, first of all, there are two sirens that sound. There's one at 8 p.m. on Erev Yom Kippur. So this year, that would be Tuesday night at 8 p.m. And then another siren at 11 o'clock in the morning. And these are the same air raid sirens that we've been hearing for the past over a year and a half now, whenever we've been attacked by the Houthis, by Iran, by Hamas. Last week was Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and there was a siren at, I believe it was 11 o'clock in the morning, might have been 10 o'clock in the morning, but it was a very different, it was the air raid siren, but we all reacted with an element of PTSD. I mean, this siren brought back so many traumatizing memories for all of us as we were caught off guard and had to run into bomb shelters, run across the street from the park to open apartment buildings and scurry down to their stairwells. For many of us, everyone I talked to said that the siren on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, was jarring to us because it's the same exact air raid siren system we've been hearing. And it's going to be no different on Yom HaZikaron. The two sirens at 8 p.m. and 11 a.m., those are the same sirens that are used to notify us that we need to go to the bomb shelter. So those happen every year, but more jarring this year. There are ceremonies. Just about every town holds its own commemoration ceremony. For us in Ra'anana, it's at Yad Labanim, the big town square. And there are chairs already being set up right now, and a stage is in place. A sound system is being constructed. And again, a very sad ceremony where parents and siblings and even grandparents, spouses of fallen soldiers will come up onto the stage and read poems and eulogize their loved ones who have fallen. I remember I've gone to the ceremony a few times in Ra'anana, and if I remember correctly, there's a part where they actually read the name of every soldier from Ra'anana who has fallen. I believe it's ever. And it goes back from the War of Independence and until sadly even weeks ago, or as however recent it might be. Uh, so there are those ceremonies. On the radio, the music is somber the entire day, and same with television programming. So imagine, Memorial Day in the US. I believe the Indy 500 auto race takes place Memorial Day weekend. That's a car race, fans, food, beer. I mean, could not be more different here in Israel, where all the programming on television, radio is geared toward remembering those who've fallen. And again, you obviously far too many have fallen to honor and memorialize everyone. But certain families come forward and tell their stories. Certain girlfriends will talk about boyfriends. Sadly, boyfriends will talk about girlfriends. We've had a number of women soldiers who've been killed since October 7th, and certainly many on October 7th itself. And then here was something I did not know happened, but I only discovered when I moved to Israel, is that many high school students are paired with a family in that town for the duration of the day. I remember one of my daughters She went to Metro West High School. She was paired with a family in Ra'anana who had lost their son, I believe it was, in one of the recent wars. And she stayed with them. She and a friend were paired with this family, and they stayed with them. They went with them to the cemetery that day, and they went back to their house and sat with them in their living room. And while the family talked and remembered their child, my daughter and her friend were there with them, accompanying them throughout the day. And to me, that was an extremely meaningful thing to see as a father, to see your child who, how 16, 17-year-olds can be. You'll often think, you know, they don't do the dishes and their room is a mess and they ask me for money all the time. And you can get frustrated with parenting a teen, but then you see your teenager going and accompanying a family, to the cemetery and really bringing comfort to them. And it makes you realize that there's so much more to your child than what you just see at home. And it also reminds you of why you're living in this country. And I'll get to that in the end. But, those are the kind of moments that make me want to live here despite the challenges that we have. So that was very meaningful to me, having my high school kid accompany, this family. And this happened a number of years for the 3 years that she was in high school, reminding you that high school is 3 years for the most part here in Israel. There are, of course, visits to the cemeteries. All the cemeteries are packed. I mean, not full, packed with people visiting the graves of their loved ones. And I want to reiterate that kids know what Yom Hazikaron is. The siren blares at 11 o'clock in the morning when kids are in school, and little kids, kindergarten, first grade, are in school and stand at their desks quietly when the siren blares. I should note also that wherever you are when that siren goes off, you stop in place. So if you're driving at 11 a.m. Wednesday morning, you pull over, you get out of your car, stand next to the car. It's eerie. You can go online on YouTube and see the clips of it. But it really is eerie seeing an entire nation come to stop. Why doesn't every country in the world do this? Well, I can hypothesize. I think the notion of sacrifice is so much closer to what it means to be Israeli than it is to other, countries. I think if everyone in the U.S. had to serve in the military, then maybe Memorial Day would get more respect. But because in the U.S. it's really seen as the job of the other to, I don't think even people think it's defending the country. People often think that the military in the U.S. is there just to pursue U.S. economic goals around the world. And I'm a big believer that militaries are necessary. There is such a thing as evil. We can't be naive. And were it not for America's military might, Americans could not enjoy the lives that they have. And it really is a shame to me that soldiers in America don't get the respect that they deserve. But kids do know what Memorial Day is, what Yom HaZikaron is. And they also grow up knowing that they will go to the army as well. So this is not just some sort of rated R type of day where it's restricted for 17 and older. This is for everyone. Everybody knows what happens on Yom HaZikaron. And of course, most kids can name one or two people that they know have fallen, which is sad in and of itself. Another unique thing that happens in Ra'anana, at least, is that the street signs are changed to the names of soldiers who have fallen. And I took some pictures of this today. I'll be posting them. I posted one on my Instagram account today, and I'll be posting more throughout the week. But the regular street signs here in Ra'anana have been covered over with a black, I believe it's a black cloth, it looks like, or a black piece of cardboard. And on that black cardboard, you have the name of a soldier who's fallen in battle and the age they were when they fell. And I'll remind you, my Instagram is at Joel Chasnoff if you want to see those pics, either from today on Wednesday, there will be more as well. But that is a real reminder too of Yom HaZikaron hitting home, seeing the names, it's all about putting a face and a name to those who have fallen. There's no such thing as an anonymous soldier who fell. They all have names, they all have faces, and Yom HaZikaron is the day when we do our best to really put that human face and remind ourselves who they are. So let's talk a little about what it's going to be like this year on Yom HaZikaron. Well, as I mentioned, we had Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day last week. And it was very different from any Yom HaShoah I'd ever experienced here in Israel. Even last year, which was the first Yom HaShoah since October 7th, I think we were still close enough to October 7th to still be a little bit in panic mode, as we say in Israel, behelem, kind of confused as to what exactly is going on. But this year on Holocaust Remembrance Day, there were many people saying, what are we doing? We're commemorating the Shoah, but there are still Jews experiencing a Shoah, a Holocaust right now. That at the very moment that we are standing in the town square listening to this very sad music and having Holocaust survivors talk about what they went through, we have 59 Israelis who are still being held hostage in Gaza in conditions that are very similar to what Jews experienced in the Holocaust. And in some cases, you could even say worse, in that they are chained to the wall and are in cages and are 50 meters underground. I mean, it's hard to compare atrocities, which atrocity wins, but the very idea that we were commemorating Yom HaShoah while there are still Israelis experiencing what it means to live through a Shoah, that was it's an overwhelming and awesome, in the bad way, idea that we are still trying to wrap our heads around. And I think it's going to be very similar with Yom HaZikaron, that, you know, Israelis are very resilient and we have this emotional reserve. I think the bell curve of Israeli emotion is much wider than those of other people. We get angrier and more frustrated than others, but we also can be more generous and loving with than others. We have a very wide spectrum of what it means to emotionally be Israeli. And we also know how to allocate our emotion as necessary. And on Yom HaZikaron, we allocate the appropriate amount of emotion toward the remembrance of those who have fallen. But the thing is, we have been allocating this emotion constantly for a year and a half. And I've talked about this before, how smoking rates are up, how the rates of depression and PTSD are up, how the divorce rate is up, how the domestic violence rate is up. All these bellwethers for what it means to be a society under stress are up. These indicators are there. And so I wonder if we're actually going to have the emotion available to make Yom HaZikaron as meaningful as it usually is. I think it'll be a little bit more meaningful than a typical day here in Israel. But 7 years ago, Yom HaZikaron was 30 times more meaningful and deep and emotional for the average Israeli. Whereas this coming Wednesday might be 1.5 times or twice as emotional. Not that it doesn't mean anything to us, but just that we are so spent. And just to get through an average day here takes so much cognitive dissonance and lying to oneself and balancing of emotions, that to now allocate all that emotion onto one day, I don't know if we're capable of it. There's just so much that has been asked of us. And, we had two soldiers die yesterday and another died 2 or 3 days ago in Gaza. So now as the Gaza fighting ramps up, sadly, we might be seeing more of those numbers. There's just so much emotion here. I have to wonder if we're going to be able to allocate the emotion necessary. So what are my personal feelings about Yom HaZikaron? Like I said before, this really highlights the biggest difference to me between Israel and other countries in the world, and certainly between Israel and the country I grew up in, the United States. Israelis are very close to the idea of giving and of sacrifice. On October 7th, they asked for X number of soldiers to join the reserves, and twice as many, I believe, showed up as was actually requested, or maybe 150% showed up. People who weren't asked showed up. You would not see that in America. And I'm not trying to put America or Americans down, and certainly not trying to put you, the listeners, down. But let's be honest here. Uh, when that kind of tragedy, God forbid, were to strike in the US, you would not see that massive outpouring of, that sort of volunteerism that would then continue for a year after. It's in the Israeli DNA to contribute, to give, to sacrifice. And that's why the holiday means so much to us, because every single Israeli knows at least one soldier or victim of terror, and in many cases, multiple. And like I said before, it is one of the reasons that I live here, despite how hard it is. And it's become incredibly hard to live here for the past year and a half. I've talked about that many times on this podcast. I'm not saying I live here because Memorial Day here is more meaningful than Memorial Day in America. But I think Memorial Day as a metaphor for what Israel is explains why I and many others like me, immigrants, choose to live here. That ultimately we feel that there is something more meaningful to life here, that you're a part of something, you're a part of a cause, you're a part of a narrative, you're part of a mission, and you're bound up with the others living around you who are taking part in this same story along with you. One of the great things about America, I think, is that you can put up a wall and wall yourself off from others that you don't want to associate with, so long as you have enough money and means to do so. Well, in Israel, there are no walls. It really doesn't matter how wealthy you are or how well off you are. At the end of the day, the country is your country, and it comes calling for you as well, and you can't avoid that. And while that can be demanding, there's also something very special about it. So to me, Yom Hazikaron is one of those reasons why I know that we belong here, even though in so many ways, the easy to name ways, whether it's the behavior of people, the demands of the country upon you, the taxes, the salaries, whatever, like all that would be in many ways so much easier in the US. It's still more meaningful here, and it's it's the story that you're a part of. And Yom HaZikaron, I think, is for me the epitome of what makes Israel special and why those like me want to be here. I'm now going to move on to two questions that you sent in. I actually got many questions over the past 2 weeks. I had to choose two for today, one heavier, one a little bit lighter. So the first question is from Rena. Rena asked, Joel, you've talked a lot about how you and most Israelis want the government to make a deal that would release all the hostages, even if it means pulling the IDF out of Gaza. What makes you think that Hamas would actually live up to the deal and tell the truth? What incentive does Hamas have to keep the hostages alive? That is a great question. I think that second part is easier. What incentive does Hamas have to keep the hostages alive? I'm going to answer this sort of in a longer roundabout way. If you watch television here in Israel, you will see on the news programs a lot of debate about where the country is going. What does it mean to send soldiers back into Gaza again? How did we let October 7th happen? Who should be held accountable? What does it mean when it comes to Jewish ethics that we are going into Gaza and killing so many civilians? These debates, where does the country go? These are gut-wrenching debates that we are having, and they're public. In the Arab world, you will not see that. All you see is the bluster. Hamas parading the hostages around, Hamas marching with their uniforms and firing their guns. But I assure you that behind the bluster, Hamas is worried for its existence. Hamas is panicking. And that is why they need to keep the hostages alive. It is the only bargaining chip they have. If it were to be discovered that none of the hostages were alive, then Israel could absolutely decimate Gaza. And believe me, there are people in the government and in society who want that to happen. The hostages are the only thing standing in the way from that happening. And by the way, I mentioned 59 hostages. At this point, we believe only 24 are alive. Two foreign nationals and 22 Israelis. So, just for the sake of 22 Israeli human beings alive, we are holding back. We are not going full out in this war. That is that is the incentive that Hamas has to keep the hostages alive. Gila sent me a number of very deep questions, but I'm going to punt, Gila, and save your hard questions for next week or the week after. Instead, I'm going to go with your easiest question, which is this. Our youngest son just enrolled in a Birthright Me'or 10-week summer program in Israel. How worried should we be about his safety this summer? Well, that is such a Jewish mother question, Gila, and I'm sure others out there have similar questions about the safety of an Israel trip. My personal opinion is that you have nothing to worry about. If anything, you have less to worry about than ever because we are on high alert. We're also monitoring where kids go on their summer programs. They will not be going up to the Lebanon border the way I did. They will not be going down close to the Gaza border. They might go to the Nova music site, but they'll be under heavy supervision and heavily guarded and watched over. And I'm not even sure they would go there. For the most part, they will be in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. These itineraries are very well planned, and they are checked with the army to get the all clear. So I would say that you actually don't have anything to worry about, and I would send your child with confidence. Now, I'm just one guy giving his opinion. So that's a little disclaimer, but I really believe it's safe here. And you'll see kids out and about riding the buses, riding the trains the way they always do here. Day to day life is going on, despite how heavy I make it seem in this podcast. And I also, by the way, I spoke to someone from Camp Ramah just last week about this summer, and he said that enrollment on their summer program here in Israel is the highest it's been in a number of years. So in 2021, we had Guardian of the Walls and that war. And then last summer, of course, the first summer after October 7th, enrollment was understandably down. But now Ramah's numbers are coming up, and I'm really happy to hear that. I'll check in with some other tour providers and maybe get you some more answers on that soon. But it's good to see that parents finally are coming back on board and allowing their kids to come to Israel. I personally think it is very safe. I would not worry. I mean, I don't worry. I'm here right now. Next week's live broadcast will take place once again on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That is Sunday, May 4th. Wow, already May next week. You can get the link for that live broadcast in my newsletter, Hebrew is Magic, which you can sign up for on my website, joelchasnoff.com. And that has links to other stuff about this podcast, about my comedy, my books. So obviously go there and check out everything. Thank you so much for joining this week. It was great to see you and great to give you some insight on this very meaningful day that's coming up, Yom Hazikaron. And I'll just conclude by reminding you that Yom Hazikaron fluidly, seamlessly transitions into Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, which is so fitting as well that our independence didn't come from nowhere. It is only enjoyed because of the sacrifice that so many people made. And I think that's a very poignant message and extremely Israeli as well. I'm Joel Chasnoff signing off from Ra'anana. Thanks so much for joining us this week. Lehitraot.